Hello, everyone, and welcome to Reasonably Spontaneous Conversation. My guest today is Mike Bedenbaugh. Hello, Mike.
Hello, Dennis. How are you today?
Oh, it's my pleasure. Your wonderful publicist, Helen Cook, contacted me and said, I have a guest for you. He's written this amazing book, and I think it's important for you to talk about it. Reviving Our Republic. Here it is, 95 Theses for the Future of America. And so I immediately contacted her and she contacted us, and that's what we're doing today. So, Mike, let's go back. You have used Ben Franklin's quote when the woman asked him, Mr. Franklin, what kind of government do we have? And he said,
A republic if you can keep it.
so here in 2025, I want you to play Ben Franklin for me through your eyes and tell me, what kind of government do we currently have?
If I was playing the role of Ben Franklin, I don't know if I could utter the words because I'd be choked up by what I see and the failure that has happened and what we've done to ourselves. I would be devastated. I would be astonished at the lack of cultural enlightenment that he grew up in, that developed him, the sense of how citizens higher, better angels would govern the society and they would elevate. Um, and he would see the vulgar aspect of what we turned into, and he would recall that quote, knowing full well that if you can keep it, that if would be a capitalized if, because he understands how vulnerable these type of government institutions are.
Exactly. I love that. And because we are that, I feel exactly the same way. As I was looking through your YouTube reels, and of course we will have your shorts and we'll have the link to all of your website and the work that you're doing.
Thank
You
you.
have come to this to your understandings and this through the lens, perhaps not lens is not the word to use, but through the perspective of the conservative movement and coming back from that perspective. Do I have that? Have I framed that correctly?
Well, let me clarify. I consider myself a conservative constitutionalist. However, the word conservative has been so corrupted over the past 40 years that
Exactly.
what people are calling conservative now, I consider right-wing liberalism. It has nothing to do with traditions. It has nothing to do with the governing traditions of this nation or any sense of conserving the type of things that conservatism was meant to be.
Got it.
And and so I tell people that, and so just in the so I limit myself when I say I'm a conservative constitutionalist, but I'm a
Exactly.
social liberal. I'm the
Yep.
classic liberal in the sense of like Jefferson. I tell my friends here, Jefferson and Jesus were liberals.
Yeah.
So you need they were considered liberals at the time. And
Exactly.
I'm in that vein believe as long as following the law as prescribed through our governing process of representation through the government, being part of this giant club called America. I
Yes.
give my citizenship to that and I follow that, and things I don't like about it, I engage and want to change through my
And
own
that's where we are
independence.
today. That's what I want to ask you because as I began looking at the principles and the things that you're saying, one of my biggest areas that of concern for me is there's a number of them. For one, I am a big believer in the tricameral system where
Yes,
we actually have the checks and balances. I think that was an extraordinary gift that we have. But it does mean that everyone needs to exercise equal. They were
that's
co equal, correct?
yes, yeah, and they had specific roles they were supposed to play in that. and
Yes,
and not only the co-equals of the three branches of the federal government, but then you have the different layer of the state governments with the federal government, right?
thank you.
And
Because we
one
are a
thing,
republic. We are a
we are
republic,
a
not a democracy.
republic. That's right. And I call it, we're a democratic republic. We use democratic institutions to elect representatives who are responsible for making the laws.
Exactly.
And
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 they're supposed to represent us, not
yes,
and that seems to we've gotten away from that they are representing other kinds of constituencies beyond the people that they are actually representing.
right. And representing the societal,
The interests.
the interest. Well, here's one of the things that the language has changed. I mentioned conservatism has changed.
Thank you.
The other thing that has changed is the word constituency, because
Ah,
now the word constituency has come to mean the people who voted for me and not the people I represent. And that's been a dangerous
thank
movement.
you.
That's been a dangerous shift in our perception. And that's a real serious problem. And the other aspect, when I look at representation, because I ran for Congress as an independent, and I told everybody, people say, well, will you represent what I want? I said, here's what I will do. I will go and tell you, here's my norms on how I make decisions. And I will be on the other side of the veil when I'm in Washington. And I will make the best decisions I can make based on the Constitution and what's better for the whole society and my district. That's
Wonderful.
how it's supposed to work.
Wow.
And not just because the loudest voice is screaming at me over the phone and I must follow them.
Well, let me ask you a question. I want to digress before we dig into this deeper. What did you learn about yourself in the process of running for Congress? Because that's such an extraordinary experience to be able to do. So dig a little into that for a minute, would you please?
Yeah, what I learned about myself was having to constantly engage with people I didn't know. And the uncomfortable aspect of that for me personally, you know, I am not a politician where I'm comfortable selling something. And our system has elevated salesmen. And that's what people expect to see is
The
a salesman.
marketeers.
That's right. They expect marketers and salesmen and people who know how to brand them, but they don't brand themselves. They brand a veneer of what people want to see, right? And I
Oh,
found
that is
myself,
brilliant. Brilliant,
well,
Mike.
but that's what I learned is I'm not comfortable with that.
Yes.
Um, and 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 it's fascinating in my study of history. There's a lot of political leaders we had, especially the first half of our republic's existence, that
Yes.
would never be alive on the platform today because they weren't marketers, they weren't self promoters.
No.
I'm not a self promoter trying to get people to like me. I just like sharing ideas and hope people come to it.
Sure.
And I was ill-equipped with the landscape where I had because I ran as an independent under the Alliance Party, which was started by friends of mine here. We were on the ballot,
Sure.
and of course, this district is one of the reddest districts in the country, and it was and the Republican machine that's in the state was created first by Strom Thurmond, then by Lee Atwater,
All
and
right.
it
Now there's a lineage.
that's a lineage, and it is hardcore. And these people will, if and we're one of only 7 states that you could just hit R at the top of the ballot and not have to look at another thing.
Boom.
Boom, done. And so that's why it was impossible for me to win unless I had $2 or $3 million to throw.
Yeah.
My Republican person who was running there, Sherry Biggs, she had $900,000 flow into her coffers. A third of it in the last 2 months when she had already won by outside PACs and outside interest. We our districts have become colonized by outside interest. And
Exactly. And it's happening now all the way down to the school board, to sheriffs. There's
everything.
money going into sheriffs races. There's money going into, so let's just in the first place, because it feels to me, because when we talk about the 95 principles and we talk about what you're doing, it seems to me that at the top of the list for me anyway, is what are we going to do about the outside influence of money in
Right.
our, and what would be the practical ways, where, how are we going to claw this back? Because it feels to me that because we have let this genie out of the bottle, that there is no way to put it back in the same way that that it went out. So we're going to have to figure out a new way of doing it. Have you given this some thought and helped me to put my mind around it?
Well, it takes a type of engagement from people to finally say enough. I mean, the reason we are where we are is because so many people in our process and citizens, one, does not understand how our government is supposed to work, the lack of
Right.
civic education,
Sure.
and the lack of engagement from a third to 40% citizens that don't even vote. So,
Isn't
so
that
there's,
doesn't that take your breath away? Doesn't it break our hearts
yeah.
when we see that, when we have that level of disengagement?
Yeah, it is. And it's expected in a society that is a consumptive society like ours. As long as we can get cheap toothpaste and good rates on a car loan, don't bother us, we're happy. And who cares? And so, I never forget riding around and Republican operatives here in the state when the gas prices went up when Biden was in office, little stickers went on every gas pump. I did this with a sticker Biden pointed to it. And of course, when it started going down, the same people came and took all those off. So, but how I looked at it, I just framed it. And just to be clear, I went to this through the lens of Washington's farewell address, where he
Yes,
basically laid out what Franklin has said. If you can keep it, Washington laid out, here's how I believe you can keep it if you follow these certain things. And I extracted out of all of that 40 policy points. And one of the big ones that he didn't really go into because he didn't understand modern political funding like we have now, but it's an outcome of the party apparatus that he was concerned about, was
exactly.
was and it's a simple thing, and it's one of the most unifying things say in a folks talking with folks, and Democrats and Republicans agree with it. You can't give money to any candidate unless you can vote for that candidate. Period.
Right.
Period. Now, whether there's a limit, I don't know that. There's ways you have to deal with that. There's ways of exposure, but just a basic principle that you can't, and that will require a constitutional amendment. I mean, I
Right.
don't see any other way around that. Now, one of the ways that a lot of people go against Citizens United and are angry about Citizens United. Well, let me say how my perspective on these things are. Like I'm a strict constitutional conservative, but I'm also a textual originalist when it comes to the Constitution. I believe that is the best and most efficient way to read the Constitution because it makes it clear and plain so everybody's on the same level on where we can change it. Because
Exactly.
when you think you can, when some people think they can just make a decision because of an interpretation versus let's go, that's where the debate is now. And so when Citizens United was rooted in logical legal precedents because of personhood given to trusts and corporations over the 150 years. All
Yep.
of it. I'm sure you do. I mean, I have 4 corporations that have been given protections because of personhood that protects trusts.
Exactly.
Well, when you're a textualist, like most of the Supreme Court justices are now, you look at that and say, we have no choice. This is
I,
what it is. So
I,
what
I
has to happen? Yeah. So what has to happen is we need to go into the 14th Amendment and make sure we make clear persons is clarified between natural persons are artificial personas. And if we do that, that will clear up 50%
All right,
of
but
all
let
that
me
problem.
ask you this. On the road to that, what is the problem? What would be you see the problem between saying, okay, let's just turn the light on and say, we know where the dollars come from, that no longer are you shielded by a PAC or a super PAC.
That's right.
Whoever funds it, all right, we can't do anything about this, but the minimum we can do is to be able to trace back the dollar that you gave to you.
And only individuals that could vote for you. So if you're in a district in South Carolina, only money from your district, from individuals, will come into your campaign.
Does that require a constitutional amendment, or would that just be could that just be a law that Congress could pass and then would go up to the Supreme Court to say whether or not it was legal?
I don't think a law can pass. I think the Supreme Court would shut it down. But here's the thing that I really don't know, and I cannot wait to get into room and understand this. Congress can pass rules regarding its membership. They can pass rules. And I wonder, I'm not a legal scholar, and this book is all about a conversation, right?
Yes.
And I wonder, and I like to have the conversation, is can the House just say anybody running for office here can only take funds from, if you want to come into these halls, you can only take funds from people that vote for you. I mean, the Constitution gives clear, wide open use. The House can make its own House rules.
That's fascinating. So as you see this going forward, where are you on the optimism pessimism scale at this time? Because I tend to move around on that. And while I am wired an optimist, that's my wiring, I have serious concerns about about where we're going, and as far as keeping this opportunity. I have serious concerns that Congress is abrogating its role in our constitutional republic. That it's not doing its job right now, and that really concerns me, because absolute power is intoxicating.
Yeah.
It will do it. It doesn't matter who is doing it. And
So my optimism is firm in that we will get through this. My pessimistic reality is, and knowing history, it is going to be a very rough road. And
I do
how
too.
rough it,
I don't think I'm a little concerned. We're in the same generation, even though I'm older than you are. But at 70, I do not think that this is going to be beyond my lifetime, that we're going to be going through this. This does not appear it's going to be a sharp change and
no,
turnaround for me at all, Mike.
it's not. It's not. And that's the caveat I give. One of the things I had my podcast perspective that I have now, Reviving Our Republic, and I talk about how I believe you can't understand America without understanding South Carolina, because
Ah,
South Carolina
wonderful.
history.
Charleston and all that gorgeous. I mean, South Carolina is an absolutely gorgeous area of the country. And so tell me some of the things that if we learned about South Carolina, that we could then put across the
Well, let
United
me
States.
just tell you the quote that during the secession convention, a gentleman by the last name of Pettigrew, who was against the secession, stood up and told the conference that South Carolina is too small to be a country and too big to be an insane asylum. And so, of
Too
course,
big for an insane asylum. That's great.
and so we have had a history of very reactionary politics that has gone the gambit. we consider, and I could argue in a whole nother platform, that the Revolutionary War was won by South Carolina. In the upstate of South Carolina, this is where the British were bled to the point of where it would be impossible for them to win this war. And in South Carolina, it was a true civil war. In fact, all my ancestors have been here before the Revolution, and half of my ancestors were loyalists, the ones that survived. And so you have that. Then you have the nullification crisis in the 1840s, when we tried to, nullify the laws, the tariffs, and all of that. And then in the Civil War, we finally got, we got all the lower states to follow us. But the only reason the lower states followed us was because Jackson kicked out all the Indians, and South Carolinians populated Mississippi and Alabama. so that's
that's the same thing with here. Us in Texas, there were signs that they were gone to Texas. They were just boom, boom, boom.
Three of the people in the Alamo were from Saluda County, 20 miles away from me. So South Carolina had a huge impact. It was our leadership that stopped stopped the I wouldn't call it leadership, but it was the influence that stopped the Reconstruction movement, and then the Jim Crow laws that came about, and then all of these things. We have a weighted influence,
outsized influence, right?
Outsized influence on the American system. And it's rooted in a lot of independence and a lot of Scotch-Irish history, all of these things. The same folks that gave the British so much trouble on the borderlands and gave the Irish trouble, they shipped them all over here and up in the frontier. And, let's put those Scotch-Irish out there. They'll wipe out the Indians. And so it's a fascinating history, but it's one that is still rooted in American culture. And
exactly.
I took a lot of Russian history, and I love Russian history. And there was a time in Russian history called the Time of Troubles, when the Ivan the Terrible killed his son, and they didn't have a czar, and they had a civil war. Boris Godunov and all these, and then the new czar family, the Romanovs, came into power. That was called the Time of Troubles.
Thank you.
And I see us getting ready to go through a time of troubles. I don't know the extent of it. I don't know how long it will be, but I do know we need to create something that we can attract conversation to give some form to a solution. That's why I wrote the book. And I don't mean to make that sound hubris. I mean, I'm just a guy here in Prosperity, South Carolina, but I've thought all my life about this. I put 64 years of intention into my citizenship.
Yep.
And that's what I believe. I believe I can articulate some things that I hope will influence. And that's why I wrote the book. And so I am an optimist, but I don't keep my powder dry.
Yeah. Exactly. Because this is what we're going to be, because it appears to me part of what the existential angst that we're seeing out here in society in general is the delta. The rate of change is accelerating at the fastest ever in human history. So people are deeply concerned about, well, how am I even going to fit into this society? I can't even imagine what it would be like for me if I was in college as a senior in college right now, looking out at the economy and going, what? How could I possibly?
Well, technical change has always been good for humanity in the long run, but in the short run, it was hard.
It's never been as fast as now. And I agree. I love how you phrase that, because it will. And this is the other time. So I'm reminded, I guess, because I've also been studying. I mean, I watched what happened in Ireland and all when we talked about the Troubles, and we may be coming into a time, Mike, of the Troubles.
Yeah. People tend to look at our Civil War in kind of a romantic, Ken Burns, sweet music, black and white pictures don't seem as real. But people have to understand what we went through during that time when more people died in our Civil War than died in the Revolution, War of 1812, First, Second Seminole War,
Combined.
Mexican War, all the way up, First World War, Second World War, Korean War, until Vietnam combined. South Carolina, the fighting age men, we lost 25% of the white fighting age men in our state.
My goodness.
So that means that tragedy can happen. And we
Yep.
have to be prepared for it, and we have to not prepared for it as if that's going to happen. I hope to God it doesn't go that far.
I do too.
But
May I ask
there is a reality.
Yeah, it is. Now, I want to ask a question, because the one thing that has really been bothering me since we're talking about the end of slavery and we're talking about Reconstruction and Jim Crow and all, it appears to me that there is a rewriting of history that does not accept. To me, I can hold two things at the same time, two thoughts at the same time. I can recognize the incredible innovation and the extraordinary spirit of the Constitution and the people that wrote it and all, even though they owned slaves. I can see all the technology and the work they did. At the same time, the horrors of selling a human being and splitting up the families and enslaving them. I can hold those two thoughts at the same time. I can actually study the horrors of slavery and sit there and to say, okay, well, look today, the average white family, the median income value is $240,000. The average black family is $20,000. Why is there such a disparity? What is that? And does that mean that we still have some systemic areas that we could work on, possibly, that we could do? I'd like to talk about that. I'd like to have that. But it appears that what we're having right now with the current administration in 2025 is an attempt to diminish in the name of, oh, we don't want to be we need to focus on the positive, and it really wasn't as bad as it was, and we don't really need to do it, and that bothers me.
Well, it's getting in the way of understanding who we are. Now, I understand why the current president does this, because he's a salesman and a marketer. And when you sell and market things, you only focus on the good. So I understand
Beautifully
why.
done. Oh, Mike, you have just clicked the entire thing in my head. Of course, you never go into a car salesman and have him go, well, let me tell you the defects and the things that you're going to have to worry about respecting
That's
that.
right.
No, it's all, this is the best car, the finest that you've, you've actually dropped the pins.
Well, and so I did a video about this because he put out an executive order. The man loves executive orders more than anybody I've ever seen. He just writes stuff. Not that they mean anything, but it sounds good. He likes it, and they tell him it's okay. But about how the federal government, when they give money, can dictate what history is told. And that is one of the most dangerous things, because I believe in federalism. I believe locals should tell their own story. That drills down even further. I believe in humanity, and I have faith in people becoming the best they can be if they're given the chance. They'll bump into each other. There'll be problems a little bit, but the law has set straight. There is a move now among local museums to recognize the fact that within their communities, there were people that suffered at one time. Maybe they're not suffering as bad now, but to tell their story, to talk about it, is really important. And we need to dissect who we are. We need to be able to dissect what we did and how we did it, and so we can be a better nation. And it's not strange, because I recognize the impetus. I grew up in the South. I had a great uncle that was a Klan leader. I lived in a world. I was born in South Carolina with one foot being on a family with land, with two black families working for my family that had been there 2 generations.
Yep.
and then seeing how the world has changed. And when you talk about change came so quickly, it amazes me how quickly we grew out of that horrible institutional system into a place that is a different world today.
It
Where
is,
I
Mike,
go
but
into
let's just be really clear though. You and I experienced this from the white male perspective. We looked at Jim Crow from the side of we could go into areas where the black families could not,
oh,
and that
absolutely.
it gives us a different perspective than we would have were we a woman, were we a black family. It's a different perspective. We can understand it intellectually, but we don't really know.
Well, I had Florence, a black woman who raised me. She had to walk half a mile out of an old schoolhouse that my family let her live in that had no running water, a pump, and an outhouse up until 1970. And she had to walk half a mile every day to my brand new 1960s ranch home with air conditioning, with my TV and everything. And so, what I'm talking about is not necessarily perceptions of that versus other. I'm talking about the transition from that
Right.
existence into an
Exactly.
existence where it is nothing now to go into and even 30 years ago, it was not that big a deal to walk into a restaurant and see a black man with a white wife and their children in a restaurant, and nobody cared. I mean, to have a society shift and change that much that quickly is
Exactly.
remarkable.
And,
And
and we
it's
and we need to look at it, and we need to look at it over. I mean, and it's horrible to say from my privileged point of view to for me to say, let's look at it geologically, let's look at it anthropologically, because it is, we have shifted this time. But look, since this is toward the end of the program, let
yeah,
me just ask, is there anything that we have not talked about? Of course, we're going to promote your book, but that we
thank you.
have not talked about that would be important that you would just want to say right now before we end this particular conversation?
The corporatization of our society, how we have extracted capital and empowered corporations to run our society. And I go into the local Walmart and I see people employed whose grandparents used to run the local store downtown. It's we've extracted capital out of communities and has been empowered. And I truly believe we live in a corporatocracy now, and
No
and and
question.
we have to figure out how to diminish that. And that's one thing I don't think a lot of Donald Trump's very sincere supporters who believe things need to change and think he could do something. There's a lot of good people who really believe that, but I don't
Yes.
think they understand how much he is the ultimate corporatist. And that's the lens in which he sees everything. He doesn't see Gaza as a humanitarian issue and how do we deal with that. He sees it, oh, it could be developed and we could put hotels and we could bring in capital. I mean, it's so detached from the reality of the human experience to the corporate data sheet. And that's what we have to address. And we have to figure that out.
Oh, Mike, thank you so much for this time today. We have barely touched some of the subject, but you are a wonderful conversationalist. Your book that we have here, which we're going to get an opportunity to promote and to have this conversation. I think that's the biggest thing, is that we can have these conversations, and we can have this opportunity to do it. Thank you so much. Thank you for
Dennis,
giving me an opportunity to be able to be here with you.
well, thank you so much for having let me a seat at the table. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
My pleasure. And everybody, this is Reasonably Spontaneous Conversation. Mike and I just had a wonderful one. Please join us again. We'll see you then.